I'm sick of Dennis the Menace. I hate Dennis the Menace. I thought it was garbage. I wouldn't watch the show for anything in the world, and the only reason I might watch it would be to make myself sick to my stomach. The lovable rascal Dennis may have charmed America on screen, but the chaos behind the scenes was something nobody expected. What seemed like a simple, wholesome family sitcom was actually a powder keg of tension, mishaps, and emotional breakdowns. From forgotten accidents and overworked child actors to cast members quietly suffering off camera, the truth about Dennis the Menace was far from child's play. It all started with one risky gamble, a decision that launched a child into stardom and began a downward spiral that would haunt Jay North for the rest of his life. The system was cruel and vile, and the people running it were insensitive. During the golden age of American television, when primetime was dominated by wholesome family comedies and squeaky-clean children's programming, CBS wanted something fresh, a family sitcom with the innocence of Leave It to Beaver, but with more mischief and energy. The answer came from Hank Ketcham's comic strip, Dennis the Menace, which had already captured newspaper readers with its troublemaking little boy in overalls, slingshot in pocket, and a grin that spelled doom for his poor neighbor, Mr. Wilson. But bringing a comic strip to life on screen proved more difficult than expected. The studio needed more than just a cute face. They needed a child who was adorable, wild, and charming enough to carry an entire series. Dozens of child actors were considered. Ironically, Jay North, who would ultimately get the role, was initially dismissed. Executives thought he was too quiet, too reserved, maybe even too well-behaved. Screen Gems realized they did not want a pre-made child star. They wanted someone fresh, someone they could mold. Jay North, with his wide eyes and soft-spoken manner, became their blank slate. He was only 6 years old, already being nudged into a spotlight he did not ask for. His aunt and uncle, acting as his legal guardians, were eager to see him succeed. Dennis the Menace looked like their golden ticket. Jay was cast, and production ramped up quickly. Sets were built, scripts finalized, and the tone carefully designed to match the comic strip's playful chaos. Fun for kids, nostalgic for adults. Even before the cameras rolled, cracks began to show. Jay was not naturally rambunctious. Off-camera, he was shy and introverted, a boy who preferred quiet time to causing trouble. Producers ignored it. Jay's comfort did not matter as long as he brought Dennis to life on screen. What no one realized was that pushing a child so far from who he really was would come at a cost. The image of Dennis the Menace may have been picture-perfect, but behind it was a little boy being pulled into something far beyond his control. Jay North was only 6 years old when he became a household name. On paper, Jay had the kind of face casting directors loved. Bright eyes, a cherubic grin, and just enough mischief to fit the role. But behind the smile was a boy who never wanted any of it. Jay did not dream of stardom. He was quiet, introverted, and happiest when left alone with a book or a sketch pad. Yet overnight, he became Dennis the Menace, America's most recognizable child. From day one, he found himself trapped in a role that felt nothing like who he truly was. On screen, Dennis was wild and energetic. Off screen, Jay was sensitive and withdrawn, struggling to understand why he had to behave like someone else. The camera never stopped, and the pressure never let up. The network had bet big on the show's success, and Dennis, meaning Jay, was not allowed a bad day. His aunt and uncle, acting as his guardians, managed every part of his on-set life. They were responsible not just for his care, but for overseeing his career, image, and income. Jay later described them as strict and emotionally distant. Support was rare. Comfort almost non-existent. Expressing stress or frustration was simply not allowed. In a world where child actors were treated like miniature professionals, Jay was given no room to simply be a child. If he forgot a line, he was scolded. If he seemed tired, he was told to push through. There were no breaks for growing pains or anxiety. The Dennis character had to shine, and Jay had to deliver whether he wanted to or not. Soon, cracks began to show. Jay became quieter between takes, often avoiding eye contact or staying alone. He was still delivering laughs on screen, but off-camera, the real boy was retreating further into himself. The change was visible to some, but few dared speak up. What hurt most was how alone he felt. Everyone admired Dennis, but few bothered to ask how Jay was coping. He was the face of the show, but no one seemed to notice that it was slowly crushing him. The set of Dennis the Menace looked like a picture-perfect slice of suburban life. Neatly trimmed lawns, spotless kitchens, and cheerful family moments filled every episode. But behind the camera, the reality was far less charming. What looked like carefree fun on screen was in truth a tightly controlled, pressure-filled environment where tension ran high. Jay North was not the only one feeling it. The entire production ran on a strict schedule with little tolerance for mistakes. Directors demanded precision. Writers expected lines delivered word for word. Even the youngest cast members were held to adult standards. Improvisation was discouraged. Creativity took a backseat to consistency, and few dared challenge the rules. Jay's guardians helped enforce this rigidity, constantly overseeing his performance and watching closely for any deviation. Their relationship with the crew was tense. Arguments broke out over Jay's behavior, his fatigue, or his growing discomfort. One crew member described the atmosphere as walking on eggshells. The pressure was not just emotional, it was physical. One incident involved a prop malfunction that nearly injured a crew member. It was quietly covered up, but left many uneasy. Production could not afford delays, let alone scandal. Safety took a backseat to keeping the show on track. Over time, stories surfaced about long hours, exhausted child actors, and unspoken fears of speaking out. The happy chaos portrayed on screen was rehearsed and tightly managed. Nothing was spontaneous. Everything was calculated to meet network expectations. Some adult cast members noticed how isolated Jay was becoming, but few stepped in. Studio culture discouraged it. Jay was seen as the lead actor, the brand, the product, not a struggling child. With every episode, the gap between reality and the on-screen illusion widened. The show remained a success. Ratings stayed high. Fan mail kept coming, and viewers at home had no idea how fragile the production had become until the day one beloved cast member vanished and everything changed. For millions of fans, Dennis the Menace would not have been the same without Mr. Wilson. The grumpy yet lovable neighbor, constantly flustered by Dennis's innocent chaos, was one of the show's most iconic characters. Joseph Carnes played the role to perfection, with sharp timing, priceless expressions, and undeniable chemistry with Jay. But behind his comical frustration was a man quietly battling something far more serious. In February 1962, without warning to fans, Joseph Carnes passed away suddenly from a cerebral hemorrhage. The news stunned both cast and audience. Viewers mourned Mr. Wilson, while those on set were left reeling from the absence of the actor who had been the heart of the adult cast. What few knew was that Carnes had been struggling with health issues for months. Rumors circulated that he had collapsed on set before, but production pressed on. Friends said he had been losing weight rapidly and looked increasingly exhausted during filming. The network had no plans to slow down. Ratings were high, deadlines tight, and Carnes, ever the professional, refused to let anyone down. For Jay, the loss was personal. Among the cast, Carnes had been one of the few adults who treated him with warmth and patience. Unlike others who saw Jay as a product or tool, Carnes treated him like a real child. He joked with him, listened to him, and tried to ease on-set pressure when he could. Jay described Carnes as a gentle soul who made everything feel less scary. Producers acted quickly. To keep the storyline moving, they introduced Gale Gordon as John Wilson, Mr. Wilson's brother, just a few episodes later. Though Gordon was a seasoned performer, the transition felt jarring. Fans noticed something was missing, and behind the scenes, the change deepened the unease. There was no time to grieve, no space to reflect. It was back to work, smiles on camera, pain behind it. The circumstances surrounding Carnes's death drew quiet criticism. Some believed the demanding schedule worsened his condition. Others say he was simply too committed to show weakness or ask for help. Either way, his passing marked a turning point. The loss of Mr. Wilson tore a hole in the show's fabric that ratings and recasting could never repair. For Jay, it was a reminder that even the people who felt safe could suddenly disappear. As the pressures of stardom mounted, the last flickers of childhood comfort slipped away. But there was still one person on set who tried to shield him, willing to risk her job to do it. On screen, Gloria Henry played the picture-perfect mother, patient elegant, always ready with a warm smile or gentle scolding when Dennis got out of hand. She fit the mold of the 1960s television matriarch flawlessly. But off-camera, Gloria Henry was nothing like the passive housewife her character portrayed. In reality, she was one of the only people willing to push back when she saw something wrong, and what she saw behind the scenes deeply troubled her. Gloria joined Dennis the Menace. With years of acting experience already under her belt, and it didn't take long for her to notice how different this set felt. The energy was rigid, the tone professional to a fault, and the unspoken rule was clear: do not challenge the system. But Gloria had sharp instincts. She quickly became uneasy with how Jay North was being treated. She could see the pressure mounting on the young boy, the fear in his eyes when he made a mistake, and the way his guardians hovered like watchdogs rather than protectors. From the beginning, Gloria tried to create a safe space for Jay, while others kept their distance. She made an effort to connect with him between scenes, offering encouragement and light conversation. Sometimes it was as simple as sitting beside him during lunch or quietly letting him know he'd done a good job. Jay later said these brief moments with Gloria were the only times he felt seen as a person rather than a character. Her efforts, however, did not go unnoticed by the higher-ups, and not in a good way. When she questioned certain scripts that made Dennis the butt of increasingly harsh jokes, she was reprimanded. Producers reminded her of her place, warning that if she continued pushing back, her role could be written out entirely. It was a calculated threat that nearly worked, but she refused to back down. Gloria believed the show was slowly breaking Jay, and she would not stay silent while a child suffered under pressure. Even if she couldn't change the system, she could at least be a buffer, someone who would not look away. Her advocacy may have been subtle, but it mattered. Jay himself would later credit Gloria Henry as one of the few people on set who treated him with true kindness. Over time, her influence helped bring minor improvements. Scripts softened. Jay was given slightly more downtime between takes, and while the overall environment remained demanding, there was at least one adult who did not treat him like a product. Decades later, in interviews, Jay reflected on Gloria's support with genuine emotion, calling her the only person who really cared how he was feeling. Even with her quiet resistance, the damage had already been done. As the series neared its final season, Jay's exhaustion became impossible to hide. He was no longer just tired, he was unraveling. Fame that had once made him a star now closed in from all sides, and the collapse was imminent. By the final season, Jay's struggle was undeniable. What had begun as a slow erosion of joy had grown into full-blown emotional exhaustion. The smiling, bouncing boy fans adored had become quiet, distant, and withdrawn. Those closest to him were either unable or unwilling to intervene. At just 11 years old, Jay had already endured more pressure than many adults. The show's demands intensified as its popularity soared, more promotional appearances, longer filming days, and growing expectations that he embodied Dennis both on and off camera. He was flown across the country for events, paraded in front of fans, and encouraged to always stay in character. Even when sick or tired, even when he begged for a break, former cast members later recalled how different he had become. He no longer joked between takes, barely interacted with other children, and sometimes cried quietly in his dressing room, hoping no one would hear. Yet the cameras kept rolling. Jay later described those years as feeling like a prisoner, trapped inside a character the world loved, while the real boy disappeared in silence. Isolation made everything worse. The more withdrawn he became, the more his guardians and producers interpreted it as attitude or unprofessionalism. Rather than offering support, they doubled down. He was told to shape up, to be grateful, to stop complaining. His guardians, both caretakers and business managers, dismissed his feelings as immaturity. Their focus was on money, contracts, and the next season, not the boy beneath the brand. At one point, Jay became so overwhelmed he began intentionally sabotaging takes, hoping repeated mistakes might give him a reprieve. Instead, he earned more scolding and pressure. He was accused of being difficult, when in reality he was desperate for someone to notice he was falling apart. The toll extended beyond the set. At school, Jay was treated differently. Classmates saw him as a celebrity, not a peer, and he struggled to make friends. Teachers reportedly showed favoritism, which only deepened his sense of disconnection. He once said he felt like he was living in two worlds, one where strangers worshipped him and another where no one truly knew him. As the final season wrapped, producers explored new directions for the show. Ratings had dipped slightly, and Dennis was growing older, the character's charm fading. But Jay felt no relief. After years of carrying the weight of an entire production, the end arrived not with celebration, but with silence. There were no heartfelt goodbyes, no therapy, no plans for easing him back into normal life. The spotlight simply shut off. Jay North was left alone, famous, fragile, and completely unprepared for what came next. Years later, the world would finally hear his side of the story, and what he revealed stunned even his most loyal fans. When Dennis the Menace ended in 1963, Jay vanished from the spotlight almost as quickly as he had entered it. The show had made him a star, but it had also taken nearly everything from him: his childhood, his trust in adults, and, for a while, even his sense of identity. Without the structure of daily filming and the constant pressure to perform, Jay found himself adrift. He had no real plan, no guidance, and no idea how to be a normal teenager. In the years that followed, Jay attempted to continue acting, but the industry had already labeled him. To casting directors, he would always be Dennis. And for Jay, that label was a cage. He found it nearly impossible to land serious roles or be taken seriously as a young adult. The cheerful mischief that had once made him America's favorite troublemaker now became a burden he could not escape. As his career faded, so did his mental health. Jay battled deep depression, isolation, and a growing sense that he had been used and discarded. For a time, he cut off contact with nearly everyone from his past. He later admitted he struggled with anger, confusion, and long periods of silence, where he would simply shut out the world. The fame had gone, but the damage remained. It was not until years later, well into adulthood, that Jay North finally began to speak out. In rare interviews during the 1980s and 1990s, he revealed the full extent of his suffering during the filming of Dennis the Menace. He talked openly about the emotional abuse he endured, the complete lack of protection or support, and the long-term scars the experience left behind. His words were raw, vulnerable, and brutally honest, and they shocked many fans who had grown up idolizing him. In one particularly revealing interview, Jay admitted that at one point in his teens, he came dangerously close to ending his own life. The pressure had become unbearable, and he felt invisible to the people who were supposed to care for him. It was only through the intervention of a close friend that he managed to pull through. That moment became a turning point and pushed him to seek real healing. In his adult life, Jay North took an entirely different path. He stepped away from acting and found meaning in advocacy. He became a strong supporter of child actor protection laws and worked with groups that aimed to prevent others from going through what he had endured. He also became a corrections officer, a job far removed from Hollywood, where he found purpose in structure and service. Looking back, Jay has said he does not resent the fans. He understands that people love Dennis. What still hurts is how few people ever asked about Jay. Today, the story of Dennis the Menace is remembered as a charming piece of classic television. But for those who look deeper, it is a cautionary tale, a reminder of how the spotlight can sometimes burn far brighter than anyone sees. At the center of that story is a boy who was never meant to be a star.